Rationality and mysticism are often seen as opposites. Rationalists use logic and reason to make sense of the world, while mysticists claim to transcend reason by directly experiencing, they say, the oneness of the universe. But then, when you ask them to defend their position, mysticists will often claim that language is just too limited and cannot convey the deep truths that they understand. Scientists like myself are often left scratching our heads, unsatisfied and unpersuaded. But I would like to make the case for mysticism, not because I believe it is true, but because I think a persuasive and logical argument can be made. In the West, we are generally only presented with a Californialized version of mysticism that episoded by suffer dudes everywhere, like, wow, all is one, man isn't that deep. But in reality, these ideas are well developed in Eastern philosophy and are extremely subtle and reasonable, though I don't believe they are accurate. Every critical thinker must grapple with them. By mysticism, I mean the proposition that when you break down reality to its most fundamental essence, all is one. And because of this conclusion, there is indeed a way to transcend reason without breaking logical rules or disregarding our own sensibility. And we certainly don't need to appeal to quantum physics, magical woo-woo nonsense. The argument is about boundaries, and it's a natural extension of the argument that I made earlier against the existence of objects. It just takes it one step further. I won't rehearse the entire argument, but in a nutshell, what we call objects are fundamentally just concepts. Without a mind, they wouldn't exist. The object's consistent parts would exist, their atoms and particles, but not as an unified and independent thing. The boundary between floor and chair is something that's entirely linguistic and artificial. The act of naming these verses that is a function of the mind. It's useful, but it creates an illusion of living in a world of objects when in reality we live in a world of concepts. The mystic simply applies this idea consistently. They say that all divisions between things have the same quality. They are artificial projections of the mind. They are merely names. So where is the boundary between myself and the other thing? Between subject and object. Between the perceiver and the perceived. The mystic profoundly claims that there is none. If no meaningful boundaries exist, then my being cannot have boundaries either. Whatever exists is everything, which is the only thing that is. Our conception of the human mind is only that. A conception. It's a world. It's nothing fundamental. Without our naming it, it wouldn't be. Now, if what I have said is true so far, then it also justifies the mystic critique of language and reason. Think about words. What do? They distinguish and reference this from that. They help us navigate the world. But they also make claims about what is. If we want to reference what ultimately exists, what word could we even use? Literally, none. If you are linguistically referencing something, anything at all, then you are dividing up the world. And if nature isn't meaningfully divided, then it's failure to use language to try to talk about what actually exists. You can only concretely point out, in fact, what isn't. What is the ultimate nature of reality? Well, it's not this or that if you can't think about it. It's not your mind or the physical world. It's not anything at all. Now, not because this is for magical or cryptic reasons, but because it's logically cannot a verb reference it. This way of thinking also indicates human reason, or at least it seriously deflates its ability. Rationality is an attempt to make sense of the world using our minds. But from the mystic point of view, rationality misleads us. It lives with a bunch of words, sentence after sentence, of such and such, this and that. When really, regardless of how you jumble the words together, you will never learn anything about what really is. The tool of language itself is flawed to the mystery. It's like trying to drive from Nevada to Kentucky in a canoe. You are just using the wrong equipment. So, if language doesn't get us closer to the ultimate reality, or if it actually actively distracts from it, is there any way to know the truth? Yes, according to the mystic science. When the mind becomes quiet and stops naming things, you can experience boundariness.